Hi and welcome to the bonus materials for Westeros.org's coverage of the 8th episode, The Prince of Winterfell. And this week I'll again be handling the history and the setting information, and Elio will be doing the highs and lows. This week we thought we'd discuss Volantis a bit, since Talisa has her history about her past in Volantis and how she ended up becoming a nurse and all this. And Volantis is one of the 9 free cities, and it is in fact the oldest of the 9 free cities and the first of the colonies that the Valyrians established outside of their peninsula. Volantis is a very segregated society in many ways, because the Old Blood, those are the ones that claim descent directly from Valyria, they live inside these black walls that were raised by Valyrian magic, and only the Old Blood and their slaves are allowed to live in there. Plus, you may be allowed to visit, but that's all. That part of the city is for the Old Blood, and the rulership of Volantis is also entirely drawn from the Old Blood. They are ruled by 3 triarchs, which are elected yearly, and you have to be able to prove your descent as being unbroken from Valyria to be able to run for triarch. So they're very conscious about that heritage, and being a slave city, the ratio of slaves to freedmen is said to be something like 5 slaves to 1 freedman. There is obviously quite a distinction and quite a hierarchy between the different groups in the society. The slaves are, just like Talisa said, tattooed to prove or to show what they do. Some of them, warriors might have tiger stripes tattooed, and prostitutes would have tears tattooed on them, so you could easily tell immediately what a slave is for. Now, if Talisa's story is supposed to be true, and we really see no reason to doubt it at this point, it seems a bit odd that she doesn't look a bit more like Dany, because she claims the last name of Maegor, and Maegor is in fact the name of one of the triarchs at the time of the books is a Maegor, and they are one of the noblest families of the Old Blood. They would almost certainly have a very strong Valyrian heritage, and the Valyrians are just like the Volantene are well known, the Old Blood Volantene are well known for being, these silver or golden haired, fair-skinned, and often light-eyed blue or purple in the case of the Targaryens. So it's a bit odd that she doesn't look anything like that, and it's also a bit odd the way her story plays out, that she and her brother were supposed to have been bathing in this river and basically fraternizing with the common folk of Volantis. The Volantis that we see described in the novels would not, it wouldn't function like that. The nobility would have, their own pools and springs and whatever inside of the Black Walls, where they very much keep to themselves. So we find it a little odd how they decided to treat Volantis on the show when there is so much information in A Dance with Dragons about how it works.
Now, to discuss the highs and lows about this episode it's a little difficult in some ways, because there's no really high highs and there's no really low lows this episode. It was a fairly solid episode. It's The Quiet Before a Storm is very character focused, but there's little bits that sort of detract from the good scenes, and there's little bits that sort of make the bad scenes or the less good scenes more palatable. So the highs, I guess, would have to be anything Peter Dinklage has done. He's great as always. It's golden. But the whole Archmaester Chevalfin thing, it was a bit of sloppiness on their part. It's a completely made-up name. It's a very fantasy cliché sort of name, the Che with the little thing. Not that George is beyond doing that, but it's not a name drawn from books. And more notably, I think the problem is that they told them just to make up pronunciations, and they come up with pronunciations that have nothing at all to do with the spelling of that name. It makes no sense. It is nitpicky, I'm going to admit that, but if they're throwing in this detail, they should treat it as a real detail and treat it with as much seriousness as any other detail. And it was just an odd bit. I didn't really care for it. Similarly, Winterfell. Everything Alfie Allen does, that's been golden this season as well, I think. It's been really terrific. But they kind of make this sloppy thing with Osha, broad daylight, sneaking with Dagmar and Theon could turn around at any moment and spot her. It was a very clumsy way to introduce Luwin to this idea. I don't understand it, but they're in the crypts. I mean, in the book, I'm not going to keep harping on it, but George waits on that until pretty much the end of that book, and it's much more poignant. I'm not gonna say too much, but yeah. The lows, on the other hand, they have the same sort of thing going on. Perhaps the biggest low is Harrenhal. Let's discuss this. Arya's story in A Clash of Kings is very strongly a development of her character. She goes from the girl who's escaped to, and she starts going for all these names, you know, Ari, Weasel, Nan, a mouse, the ghost of Harrenhal. That's disappeared, and it's actually kind of important to her character that her identity becomes kind of fluid, but she easily adopts new identities and new names as she goes along. More importantly, perhaps, is the fact that the brutality and horror that she witnesses in Harrenhal, which includes, you know, her being casually beaten up and struck by people, and helps develop her character in a very dark way. She starts moving in a very dark direction. When she leaves Harrenhal at the end of that book, she does it by cutting the throat of a guard with her own hand. And when Gendry and Hotpie are completely shocked that she just casually, in cold blood, murdered this man, she's like, what's bothering you? Oh, the blood on my hands. Oh, the rain is going to wash it off. It's quite a development, and it's been completely excised. So if you look at it from episode 4 to episode 8, there has literally been no character development for Arya. Since the episode where she started her little litany of names, she has been the same person, and I'm very disappointed about it. I am assuming they're moving into the next season. Thalissa and Robb, I've had issues with that one. Yes, Richard Madden and Una Chaplin are very easy on the eyes, the both of them. They do pretty well with that scene, with what they're given, but it's not very compelling. For me, at least, I find it's very problematic in some ways. I'm kind of reserving judgment to see what happens in the final episode, but it's a bit of a head scratcher. I think, if I can guess, they kind of became enamored of making this the season of romance, which is what David and Dan kept saying in interviews early on, and I don't know. I think it's detracted a bit from Robb's story. It's made it kind of harder to swallow in some ways, the choices he's making. But we'll see. You know, they did a good job themselves, and you know, they look good with their clothing off, so that's something. So all in all, highs and lows is a bit of a mixed bag this time. Unlike, I think, any of the previous episodes. I guess it's a good thing you don't have any really horrible lows. But it's a shame there's no really great highs for this particular episode. And that's our bonus video for The Prince of Winterfell. The next episode is the big one. It's the one everyone, I think, has been waiting for who's read the books. It's The Blackwater, written by George R. R. Martin, which is, in my book, is probably a stamp of it's going to be something special. And directed by director Neil Marshall, who definitely has a knack for these sort of things. It's going to be epic, and we're very much looking forward to it. I'll see you next week.